We are on page 2, side 2. And yesterday we went through many of the opinions of when is the earliest time to recite Shema. And we tried to figure out if the time of the poor man entering his meal, is that the same time as the Mishnah, which is the stars come up. And what we concluded was that it is not the same time. And the reason why it's not the same time is because if it would be the same time, Rabbi Hanina would be saying the same thing as Rabbi Yehoshua. Because Rabbi Hanina said in the final brisa, Rabbi Hanina said the time of the poor man entering to eat his bread and salt. And Rabbi Yehoshua said the time of when the Koyanim are able to eat the Truma, which is the appearance of stars. So if Rabbi Hanina says, he says the poor man's time, and Rabbi Yehoshua says the appearance of stars time. So obviously they are not in agreement because they both are arguing in the brisa. So by bringing this third brisa, we have clarified that the earlier brisa that says the same time as Rabbi Hanina said, that opinion cannot fit with our mission. So that was the conclusion of the Gemara. And the Gemara now asks, so when is this time of the poor man? When is the time that the poor man eats? Is it before the appearance of stars, or is it after the appearance of stars? So we're now holding 8 lines up from the bottom of the page. 8 lines up from the bottom of page 2, side 2. And the Gemara begins on the last word on the line, Hai minayu mu'uchar. Which of these is later? And the Gemara is basically asking, when is the time of the poor man eating his bread? What time is that? When does that happen? And the Gemara says, Mistabra, it would make sense, de ani mu'uchar, that the time of the poor man is later than the time of the appearance of stars. De amrit, de ani muktam, because if you're going to say that the ani, the poor man, is earlier than the appearance of stars, Rabbi Hanina, Haino Rabbi Eliezer, then Rabbi Hanina, who says this time of the poor man, would be saying the same thing as Rabbi Eliezer, who said that at the time when basically sunset, when it starts becoming questionable of when it's night or still day, and that is like Shabbos, you have to sanctify the Shabbos then, and that is Rabbi Eliezer's time. So in other words, the Gemara is saying that if you're not going to say that the poor man is, if he's not the same time as the appearance of stars, like we've just proven, we must say that it's later than that. Because if you say that it's earlier than the appearance of stars, you will end up having opinions that really are, there are opinions that really agree, and they are in the brisa shown as they're arguing. And so, for example, how many times before the appearance of stars, what would be the time that people would go to sleep, if you're going to tell me people go to sleep before the appearance of stars, when would that be? So one option would be, sunset. That would be the other option. In other words, how many options would there be before? In other words, it would make sense that people go to sleep later, but earlier than the appearance of stars, you would say maybe, when the sun sets, maybe that would be the time. So that opinion was already mentioned, and that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. And then it would make sense then that Rabbi Hanina must be later, because otherwise he would be interfering with Rabbi Eliezer. He would be saying the same thing as Rabbi Eliezer. He would be following that train of thought. And the Brisa says they're arguing. So the Gemara says, let's just assume that it's later, then it would make sense. There must be a lot of options later than the stars, appearance of stars, when people normally go to sleep. So that's what we are asking, when is the time that would be called b'shach b'cha, when people are lying down to go to sleep. And the Talmud says that the time of the poor man eating his bread is actually later. I should mention that it's interesting, before they had watches, so I saw in the commentaries, they say that one of the reasons why the Talmud uses these type of examples of when people eat, when the poor man eats, and so on, is because what happens if it's a cloudy day? Then you don't see the stars. So it's not like the stars option is even a better option, because even the stars, even using that frame of reference, isn't so perfect, because there are days when it's cloudy. So that's why they felt it's even better to use the reference of when poor people eat their bread and salt, or when regular people eat their meal, and so on, or Friday night they eat their meal. So these are reasons why the Gemara sort of brings these other examples, and not just we thought it's simple. Oh, when stars come out, that's of course that would sound like the best reference, but it really isn't. Okay, so the Gemara concluded that if you're going to say the ani, the poor man eating his bread, is earlier, then Rabbi Hanina would be Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara ends off elalav, but rather it must be shma mina. We hear from this the ani meuchar, that the ani is later. Shma mina, we hear from this. This is a solid proof. It's it makes sense, and the Gemara concludes that the poor man eating his bread is obviously a later time than the time of the stars appearance of stars. So if we look back at all these different opinions, which time is the earliest time of these in this brisa?
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
Isn't there one of the cases that are given? Isn't there one that speaks about when the wife speaks to her husband?
So there is a Gemara that talks about that.
I thought that was here.
No, it's the next page, and it's not talking about the initial time to say Shema. It's talking about the end time according to Rabbi Eliezer, but we'll see that on the next page.
So is the earliest time in regards to when the priests are eligible to eat the teruma? Is that correct?
So the eligible to eat teruma would be the appearance of stars. So that you would be on the earlier side, but we had 5 opinions here. So does anyone know which one would be the earliest?
Sunset?
Yeah.
I would say that it would be when it gets dark, because the star would appear after it gets dark.
But then don't you have like the North Star appearing first?
Okay. So Loretta, first of all, you said sunset and you are correct. Ben, I'm not sure which time when you said it gets dark. I mean, it's very easy to say when it gets dark or when the sun's, what did you refer to? The stars, sunset. I mean, there's a lot of different times.
No, after sunset, it would get dark.
Right.
So maybe sunset would be the earliest.
So sunset would be the earliest, like Loretta said, thank you. And that's the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Now, the next time after the sunset time would be when the time of when the Kohanim are toivel, they go to mikvah. Now, the reason why I'm telling you that, I'm telling it to you this way, because logically, that would be the earliest time. In other words, if by asking this question, logically, people should have answered me when the Kohanim, they dunk to go to eat, to go to the mikvah in order to eat their truma, that has to be done during the day. So logically, that would be an earlier time. The earliest time would be when the Kohanim dunk, and that would be the opinion of Reb Meir. However, we are going to see that even though it says when the Kohanim dunk in the mikvah, and that is the time to say Shema, Rabbi Meir has a later time for them dunking in the mikvah, and it's actually after sunset. So the time of sunset is the correct time as the earliest time of this brisa. And after that comes the time of the Kohanim dunking in the mikvah. And we'll soon see how that's possible because logically, according to Jewish law, it would seem like the Kohanim have to dunk in the mikvah before sunset. So we'll soon see how that works. So the second opinion, Reb Meir, would be the second time. Then you have the opinion of the stars, which is Rebbe Yehoshua's opinion. And that would be the appearance of stars. And then we have two opinions left. And we have the poor man eating his bread in salt, and we have the people eating their meal either Friday night or eating their meal in general when they eat their meal. And
Rabbi Smith,
yes.
so the Gemara had concluded that the outside or the latest parameter is the poor man eating his bread. I don't know, personally, I would think that the poor man, don't forget, this was during a period of time where they there's no electricity. So they're burning naphtha, they're burning candles. I would think that the poor man could not afford that and that he would want to eat his meal while there was still some twilight, and that would establish the earlier time. I don't understand how they got establishing the latest parameter. That boggles my mind.
So it is surprising, especially because you're basing your logic on Rashi, who said that the poor man doesn't have much to prepare, so he eats early.
Right.
So that would also be a reason to say that and he doesn't have a candle to light, and so these are reasons why it would make sense that I'm sorry, Rashi said the candle reason point, that he doesn't have a candle for his meal, but it would make sense to say that
I know, but for the torches, I think they use. For the torches, I think they used naphtha, which was kind of, in their day, it was kind of expensive. So if we're starting with the attribute of being poor, I would think that that type of a person would want to avoid having to expend more than he really needs to on a daily meal.
Right. So what Rashi says he doesn't have a candle. I mean, that sort of says it all. He doesn't even have money for the torch or for this candle that he's going to use for his meal. So what it comes out is that when the stars come out, there is still some sense of some element of light in the that's still there, and it's not fully dark. And it does get later on, it gets fully dark, and so this would be a time when the poor man would be eating his meal. Now, I guess this is connected to the fact that the poor man also wants to work as many hours in the field as he can, and he's going to work extra long as well. So on the one hand, he wants to eat his meal when he can still see, but at the same time, he wants to also work. This is just my own thought, and that's how I understood it, that he is going to work as much as he can. And so ultimately, when you take these two ideas together, that number one, he wants to work as long as he can. Number two, there is still some light, even though the stars came out. That is that would be the reason why we could say that the poor man is going to then eat his meal.
Rabbi Smith,
Yes.
I think there is two more times. There was Chatzot and there was until Shachar.
So you're talking about the
Originally
end. Then you're
by the
talking about
Amoraim. When
Then
we
you-
talked about the Amoraim,
Then you're talking about the end time to say Shema, and
Right.
we are talking about the beginning time, the earliest time to say Shema. So that's why you're okay. Miranda, you have a question.
I was just going to add to the poor person, sometimes they didn't own their own land and they were required to work long hours because whoever owned the land may have required them to work many more hours.
Right.
I don't know if that's true. I'm going to research and see if there's some information about that. Anyway,
You got the right volume there to check it out. The
Okay.
Koran might have some, historical evidence. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've now concluded this Gemara, and we're going to continue now with 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Mar, Master said. Amar Le, Master said. We just mentioned earlier. Amar Le, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda told to Reb Meir, Vahaloi, behold, Koyanim, the Koyanim, mi ba'oid yoim, when it's still day, the Heim Tovim, they dunk in the mikvah. So Rabbi Yehuda asked a very good question to Reb Meir. How can you say that it's time to go to sleep? You can say the Shema at the time when the Koyanim dunk to go to the mikvah in order to eat truma. That is while it is still day, and it can't be a time to go to sleep. Can't be a time to say Shema. So the Gemara says, "Shapir Kamar le Reb Yehuda, the Reb Meir." Good, Reb Yehuda said to Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda said a good line to Reb Meir. Reb Meir, and what does Reb Meir say back? Hachi Kamar le. This is what he will say to answer Reb Yehuda's question. Reb Yehuda asked a good question on Reb Meir. So Reb Meir, what would he say? Hachi Kamar le. This is what he would tell to Reb Yehuda. Me Savras, do you think de ano that I, Bein Hashmoshes didach, I follow the Bein Hashmoshes, the in between time. I don't know if the Art Scroll or anyone has a good translation for Bein Hashmoshes. Does anyone have a translation of that? in your Gemaras?
Twilight. It
The
says
twilight, okay, we'll call it twilight.
Twilight.
Who says that I follow the twilight of that you go by? Ko Amina, I speak of. Ana, I bein hashmashos the Rabbi Yossi Ko Amina. I follow the bein hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi. I follow the bein hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi. So, what is this difference of twilights? In other words, there's two opinions of when twilight is. So the twilight means the time that we're not sure if it's day or night. It's in between time. And the Gemara here tells us that there's two views. Rabbi Yehuda's view is that once it becomes sunset, it becomes questionable of if it's night or not. And that's generally the way we follow Friday night. In other words, we stop doing work exactly at sunset. In fact, most calendars, they'll tell you 18 minutes before sunset, you should light candles. And the reason for that is because 18 minutes later is when we completely stop doing any work. And the reason why we don't do any work is because that is twilight, and we're not sure if that's day or night. And there is another view that twilight is right before the appearance of stars. And that view is Rabbi Yossi's view. And he says that twilight, the time that we're questioning if it's night or not, it lasts for a moment. It's not a long period. And in other words, what Rabbi Yossi is saying is that really the day continues until very close to the appearance of stars. And that's definitely still day. And when does the twilight period that we're not sure of when it is, that would be a few moments or a moment before this appearance of stars. That's when, we're not sure, is that called night or is that called day? Because it's already a nice time has passed after sunset. It's just about the appearance of stars. That's when Rabbi Yossi says we're not sure of, and that's called the bein hashmashos. That's called the twilight period. So when it comes to going to the mikvah in order to eat truma, the koyanim that are impure, they want to purify themselves. So what they commonly would do would be to dunk in the mikvah as late as possible in order that just in case they end up coming in contact with something impure afterwards, they don't want to have to go to the mikvah a second time. So they wait till the latest time possible. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the latest time to go to mikvah is right before sunset, because right after sunset is this twilight period. But according to Rabbi Meir, he follows Rabbi Yossi. And when is the twilight period? It's a moment before the appearance of stars. So if that is the time of twilight, a moment before the appearance of stars, then when would Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir tell a kohen to go to the mikvah? Well, they would tell him, listen, you want to go as late as possible, so go right before the appearance of stars, a little before that, go 10 minutes before the appearance of stars, go to the mikvah, and then, you'll have finished your dunk before a little before the appearance of stars. Then you'll have the twilight period, and then you'll have the appearance of stars, and then you'll be pure. You'll be pure to eat truma. You'll be pure enough to eat truma. So that is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir. So according to this, would the kohanim go to the mikvah before sunset or after sunset? Well, according to
That was the question. I was going to ask that question, Rabbi. So it sounds like they're actually going to the mikveh while it's still day.
Well,
which is surprising.
well, that was the initial question. The initial question was, how could they be going to the mikvah while it's still day? That was the initial question Rabbi Yehuda asked Reb Meir. Reb Meir is answering that, not that how could you go to the mikvah when it's still day. You have to go to the mikvah when it's still day. How could you be saying Shema when it's still day? How could that be the time of going to sleep? That was the initial question. The answer is that they're not going to mikvah when it's day, when it's really daylight. They're going to mikvah after sunset, a little before the appearance of stars. And they're making sure to finish their dunk in the mikvah. They're finishing it before the appearance of stars, which is before the twilight period, which lasts a moment. And then you have the twilight period, and then you have the appearance of stars, and then they are pure too. So when did they go to mikvah? Maybe 20 minutes after sunset. So they went to mikvah. So that time is a good time to say Shema, according to Reb Meir, because it's already after sunset. People do go to sleep then. It's a certain, it's a maybe 10 minutes, let's say, before the appearance of stars, and that would be the time that people start going to sleep. So that would be his opinion. So the earliest time of our brisa would be the sunset period. Then you have Reb Meir, who says the time when the Kohanim go to mikvah, which according to his opinion, they go to mikvah much later, because anyone that follows his view, they didn't have to go to mikvah before sunset. They could go to mikvah later on, as long as it's before twilight, which his twilight is a much later twilight. So the main thing is that they have to finish their dunk while it is still day. But while it's still halachically day, but even though people do start going to sleep there because it's already after sunset, at least according to Rabbi Meir's view. So that is the point of this Gemara, to tell us, to answer Rabbi Meir's view and explain to us that his view that they went to mikvah is not what we think they went while it's still day before sunset. It's that they would go to mikvah after sunset, before his twilight period, which is right before the appearance of stars. So let's just read it inside.
Rabbi,
that.
question.
Yes.
Question. What time did they light the candle in the mikveh?
What time do they light the candle in the mikvah? What does that mean?
Well, before the stars came out, after sunset, because they had to have light in order to, as you put it, dunk themselves in the mikveh. Correct or no?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say they would light their candle to go to the mikvah. Okay. So just so explain to me. So what is the question?
The question is what time? Because my question would be, they're going into the mikvah is predicated upon what time there was light around the mikvah, so they wouldn't hurt themselves. Okay. That's when the sun is setting, twilight, or when the stars are out.
So
the
again,
poor man doesn't have a candle, but the rabbis still have a candle, presumably.
Okay, interesting point. I mean, again, what our main goal is to figure out, when do people normally go to sleep, and that would be the time of saying Shema. And that's really what we're trying to figure out. So the fact that, it's a little dark, it's a little more dark, if you need a candle, you don't need a candle, ultimately, we are just trying to figure out what the rabbis are saying here in the Talmud, the different opinions. And what it comes out is that there are opinions that say, it's a sunset. There are opinions that say, later than sunset, and stars come out, and later than that. So this is really what the rabbis are discussing. So the fact that you're asking about a candle, that would fit within within the realm of some of these opinions. That idea it's definitely a good point. But again, it's not necessarily based on the fact that you need a candle or you don't need a candle to say that's when people go to sleep.
Rabbi Smith, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
For me, it's the first time studying Talmud, and I like the back and forth. My main question would be, why is it so important to know exactly? Why not give a time spread and say, okay, you have from year to year to say the Torah says b'shochvecha. B'shochvecha is not when you sit down to eat. B'shochvecha is when you lay down to sleep. Then why are we worrying about somebody eating or somebody going to the mikvah or whatever? When the Torah says when you lay down to sleep, and bekumecha, when you get up.
So the good question, very good question. And the answer is that the purpose of the Talmud is to clarify, does this mean if you go to sleep, let's say you work, during the night and you go to sleep during the day, does that mean that you can, that you can fulfill the mitzvah when you go to sleep, or does it go by the general public? So that is sort of what the Talmud is telling us here, which is a very important point, because we want to know what the law is. What does God want from us? We want to follow his law according to the letter of the law. And if God wants us to follow our own schedule when we go to sleep, so when we take a nap during the day, we should say Shema. If we take 2 naps during the day, we should say Shema twice then. And if we wake up a lot in the middle of the night and we get up, when we go back down to sleep, we should say Shema. Go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and maybe we should say Shema again. So we should be actually very thankful that the rabbis of the Talmud told us that you don't have to say Shema, 30 times a day. Actually, it goes by the general public when people generally go to sleep. But then again, we have to know clearly, because what happens if you said Shema and maybe you realize later that it was actually dark clouds came out and you thought it was night and you said Shema, was that late enough? So the Talmud is really clarifying, and that's really what the Torah is, the study of Torah is all about, is to try to understand the depth of the specifics of the details of the Torah, so that we can be clear. And one of the readings of the Shema, it says Vishinantam, one of the words in the Shema. So it has a translation that it should be so clear in your mind. Vishinantam sheyehi divrei Torah mechudadin beficha. The words of Torah should be sharp in your mind. And what that would mean is to have clarity. And it shouldn't be like, imagine if you asked a rabbi, is this thing okay, or is it not okay? Is this kosher or not? And he tells you, well, what do you need it for anyway? What do you need it for? Just use something else. Why do you need to, well, you need this? Imagine if everyone answered questions that way. You would have no clarity. And all it would be, he would just be more like a advisor telling you, don't get yourself into any questions. Just don't do this, don't do that. Just in here, the Torah wants us to have clarity, so we know what is a mitzvah and what isn't. Now, I should also mention that there's a reason why every mitzvah has its limitations. There's limits to every single mitzvah, meaning that a sukkah has to be a certain height. If it's too high, it's a problem. A shofar has to be a certain size. If the shofar is too small, it's a problem. Everything has you have to say Shema by a certain time, not before a certain time, not after. Everything Hashem, the way Hashem gave us the mitzvahs, he gave it to us because he wanted the purpose of the mitzvahs is to fit within all of these limitations, and we have to elevate, so to speak, every detail of those mitzvahs. So by the mitzvahs being limited into rules, into so many rules, we are elevating it more. We are connecting it more with the physical world. If it was just a free for all, we wouldn't be connecting it with here we're connecting it with the day, with sleeping, with with the night, with everything it connects it with the physical world around us. So we're bringing holiness into sleep, into the time of sleep, and so on. So therefore there are these commandments that it has to be, there's a certain rules that it has to fit. So again, that's why the Talmud, that's what the Talmud is trying to do, is to clarify what is the meaning of the Torah. And that's what the oral law is.
Yeah, but I always understood when you lay down to sleep for the night and when you wake up in the morning from a sleep of the night. But I don't go to sleep right after I eat dinner. I
So
can
again-
go to sleep a few hours after I eat dinner.
Right, but the point is that what you do is now going to change, because now you're realizing that, let's say one day you're tired, you want to go to sleep, and it's before night, and you're
Right.
going to say, what am I going to do about Shema? So now you realize it's not good enough for me to say Shema now. I should either wake up before dawn and say Shema then, or I should wait an extra half hour now and say Shema after, at the right time. So this is going to change your personal life, and you fulfill the mitzvah properly. If you did it the way you used to do it, you say Shema and you go to sleep and you're not feeling well, so you're going to sleep early and it's not dark yet.
But at the same time, if a lot of people these days would eat dinner and still go out to meet friends or whatever and not go to sleep. So
Yeah.
all of them are going to be in a problem with these restrictions.
Well,
Because you are not laying down to sleep. You are not doing what the Torah tells you to do.
the Torah doesn't
You're not
tell you
saying
have to go to
Shema
sleep.
when you're laying down to sleep.
Yeah, but the Torah doesn't say you have to go to sleep. The Torah says that you should say Shema at the time that people generally go to sleep. And so what happens if you don't sleep all night because you
No,
have a
it
lot
didn't
of...
say when people, it says b'shoch v'cha, when you laying down,
Okay,
not when other people laying down.
okay. Well, that is the way that you want to translate it, but the rabbis
Right.
didn't translate it that way. The translation of the rabbis is that it's that the Torah is telling you when you go to sleep, meaning normally people go to sleep. That's how the rabbis of the Talmud understood it.
The
as
timing then is by the majority, okay.
as that's what it means. So again, this is why we're studying it. It's actually changing people, it's going to change the way you understand the obligation. And so, for example,
Right,
some people
right.
think if they don't go to sleep all night, they don't have to say Shema. And that's wrong. Just because you didn't lie down, you still have to say Shema the time when people go to sleep. And I guess the reason for that is that whether you go to sleep or not, you still have to accept the yoke of heaven. So it shouldn't matter if you are going to sleep or you're not going to sleep. It's all about acceptance of the yoke of heaven. So that would be a good reason why the rabbis understood it this way. Okay, so
Thank you.
Yeah,
Rabbi, Rabbi,
Yes,
Rabbi,
yes.
there has to be uniformity with the
Well, that-
rituals that we have to perform, whether a Jew lives in Jerusalem or in Eilat or in Brooklyn or wherever. And
So-
that's why we've survived for so many centuries, really, because
Well-
you can open a book in Spanish, a book in Hebrew, a book in whatever language, and we say the same prayers
Right. So
to make sure every Jew he knows where to go to observe, whether it's in a book or it's in a ritual that the rabbi talks about from generations prior. That's the way I look at it. And the Talmud codifies all of that.
Right. So Loretta, you have a good point. The only thing is that, there are things in the Torah that do depend on the individual, and there are
Correct.
things that are uniformity. And so
Right.
part of the laws, part of the thing, the Talmud is to figure out what depends on a person's individual, what is a person's individual obligations and what is the uniformity obligations of, having everyone equal. And this would be one of the examples that Shema is, of course, individuals have to read the Shema, but at the same time, there's the time of the Shema is based on a uniform time. So it is interesting. There are two opinions. If a person can fulfill the mitzvah of Shema, if someone else has them in mind. So in other words, let's say I say the Shema and you listen to me. Would I be able to fulfill the mitzvah for you, just like if I made Kiddush for you? could I fulfill the mitzvah for you? And by saying Kiddush, and of course, all the time you go to someone's house and they make Kiddush and they have you in mind.
Right.
So how about Shema? Can I say Shema for you? And then it gets even more, such a question becomes very practical if a person can't speak. So could someone else have them in mind for the Shema? And they want to bring, there is a commentary that says in the beginning of our Mishnah, if you turn to page 2, side 1, if you look at the first words of the Mishnah, it says Koirin. From when do we read the Shema in the evening? And when it talks about the Megillah, it says Megillah Nikres, the Megillah is read. It doesn't say Koirin, we read it. And so one of the commentaries says, you know why it changes the term? Because here it's telling you Shema, you have to read it because you have to accept the yoke of heaven. So you have to read it. The Megillah could be read, meaning someone could read it and have you in mind. But when it comes to Shema, you actually have to be the one individual to read it. And it's not enough to rely on, so to speak, on the community or on the shul, they're reading it for you. And that wouldn't be enough. Now, there is an argument. There's a Shagasarya, there's another opinion that says that the halacha, that's not a final verdict. And really, you can fulfill the mitzvah for someone else. And there is that option. So he obviously doesn't learn it this way. But
Rabbi, so why when someone is dying and they call the rabbi and he reads for him the Shema, at the last of his life, so someone can do for another person.
So
like when my husband was dying, I did the Shema on him, and who will do it?
Right. So obviously, we're talking about two different things. The Shema of the Gemara is, we're talking about the Shema in the evening, and you're talking about the Shema before a person passes away. That Shema is more of a spiritual, elevating his soul, so to speak. And it should be, he should pass away with words of Torah and so on. And there, there's no question and there's no other choice. So for sure, when someone else says the Shema, it's considered a fulfillment. Now, I should also mention that even when it comes to the evening Shema, the final halacha would probably follow that you can fulfill the mitzvah for someone else anyway. So, so the real truth is that it does work to have someone else in mind for Shema. But that's a good question, Esther. Okay, so we've now concluded the Gemara. Let's open up the Tanya. We're going to study now. Yesterday we did the approbation of Zusha of Anipoili.
Oh, I can't look at it.
You have 10 minutes left. What page are you on? And the Tanya, please.
The problem with telling you the page is there are numerous prints, and the Tanyas that we're using are the English translation Tanyas, so it's a little hard to tell the page. But if you if you want to just look at the first few pages of your Tanya, there's going to be what's called a sharblat, which is the cover page. And then there's a page called the Haskamos. And that Haskamos page has 2 columns. And one of the columns is a endorsement from Rabbi Zusha of Anipoili. And the other column is the approbation, the Haskama endorsement of Rabbi Yehuda Leib, Hakohen of Anipoili. And that is what we are in the middle of reading. And then afterwards comes the statement from the author's sons. It's called the Haskamas Harabonim. That's called the statement from the author's sons, and they explain how how they put together this. It's really a compilation of 5 different books that they put in one. And then after that,
maybe I should ask the question: what chapter?
So we didn't even start the Tanya yet. After we
Oh,
finish
all right.
the endorsements, we will do the author's introduction, which is called the Hakdamas Hamalake, and then afterwards we start chapter 1. So
Okay.
probably by Passover, we'll get to chapter 1.
All right, so the approbation would be not, the approbation,
Yes.
is that what
the
you're on?
approbation, that's what we're doing now. So,
Okay,
okay, so we are holding we're holding by Veheyer Hashem. And this is in the middle of Rabbi Zusha of Ani Poili's approbation. And Hashem inspired, Beheir Hashem Asruach HaShutvim, Hashem inspired two partners, the spirit of the partners, Harehu HaRabbani HaMuflag HaVosif. The first is the outstanding, distinguished Rabbi Marino Rabbeinu Harav Shalom Shachna, Rabbi Shalom Shachna ben Marino Harav Rabbeinu Reb Noyach. So this is Rabbi Shalom Shachna Altshuler is going to be the sponsor. He is the sponsor who paid for this major printing, together with another person, Harehu Rabbani Muklag Havosik, Marino Harav Rabbeinu Reb Mordechai, then Marino Rav Rabbeinu Reb Shmuel Halevi. This is Rabbi Mordechai, the son of Reb Shmuel the Levi. So these two people, Rabbi Shalom Shachna Altshuler and Rabbi Mordechai Horowitz, they both were the ones who brought these pamphlets to the Slavita publishing house. And because they did this great deed, I congratulate them. Yasher Chela is the same as Yasher Koyach. Yasher Chela, it's the same term. And they were responsible for publishing the Tanya. It's interesting, Rabbi Shalom Shachna was the son-in-law of the no, not the son-in-law, the grandson-in-law. No, he was the son-in-law. Yes, he was the son-in-law of the author of Rabbi Shalom, of Rabbi Shneur Zalman, really the Alter Rebbe. So Rabbi Shalom Shachna was the son-in-law, and he obviously had, I guess, wealth from his father, and he was able to help sponsor this printing. And then the other rabbi is Rabbi Mordechai Horowitz, who I'm not sure if there's much information about him, but so basically Rabbi Shalom Shachna's father, his name was Rabbi Noyach Altshuler. He was a wealthy businessman, and he helped pay for the Tanya. The name Altshuler is a famous name. There's a commentary on the Tanakh called the Metzudas David and Metzudas Tzion, and possibly he came from that lineage. This Rabbi Noyach Altshuler was also a relative of the Maggid of Mezrich. His wife was a sister of the Maggid of Mezrich, and now Rabbi Mordechai Horowitz, he was a publisher who was active in bringing Jewish books to print and so on, and he also helped with the Siddur, and he helped with the Shulchan Aruch, and also with later printings of Tanya. So they both.
Rabbi, can I
Yes.
just say something?
Yes.
The book I have was published in 770 by Kehoe Publication Society,
Okay.
and also in England. And this is 1981. I don't see those names anywhere that you're mentioning, or you're just mentioning the history.
Well, no,
of the
they're in the
publication.
Hebrew. If you look at Rabbi Meshulam Zusha Me'ani Poili's endorsement, so in the middle of that paragraph, it maybe is bold, and it says Noyach, Shalom Shachna, Mordechai, Shmuel Halevi. You should see it in those two columns. You should see these two names, and you'll soon see why. Why are we talking about these people who sponsored it? So it says, Ach Olu Beliba Magor Misaviv, the publishers are.
I just saw the name,
You still
Rabbi
don't
Mordecai.
see it? You do?
I see it now.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. So the
All right.
reason
Thank
the
you.
publishers are nervous, they're gripped by terror because of the growing number of untrustworthy publishers who cause damage and ruin the reliable ones. And there was obviously competition, and they were nervous that other people would try to go and print it, and then it would damage it would ruin their ability to sell these copies. So they put on a copyright. And this is the way it was done in those days. They made a copyright. So he concludes that, so this being the case, we have resolved to give our endorsement, that no one should raise his hand or foot to cause any damage to the above mentioned publishers, infringing on the copyright. Let me just mute everyone because it's a little hard to hear. And in those days, they could only do copyright for 5 years. So they, and it seems like the rabbis used to enforce the copyright. And so therefore, in the endorsement, I guess this is common that in the endorsement of the books that were written in those days, the rabbis would make sure that no one, from the community, no one, I guess it was Jewish, they were Jewish publishers, and they, there was issues. So the rabbis would enforce the copyright. And so, and mainly, I think what they were more nervous of is not just the financial damage, but they were also nervous that there's other, about the other people taking, printing the Tanya and including mistakes in the Tanya as well, and which would discredit the whole Hasidic philosophy teachings. So, so here we have the conclusion of this endorsement is whoever listens to this will have blessings of goodness, and these are the words of the one who demands this for the honor of Torah. And he says the date was Hayom Yom Gimel. Today is Tuesday. That Shenichwa by Kitov Parsha Savai. It was Parsha of Kisavai, and it's the day Tuesday, which is, it says that Tuesday is a good day, because Tuesday, it says it was good twice in the beginning of Genesis. When it talks about Tuesday, the creation on Tuesday, it says that, it says the words, it was good twice, different than the other days. And the Torah portion of Kisavai is, it was the week, and it was the year Pidusenu, the Prat Katan, of the 6th millennium. It was the year 556. In other words, it was printed in the year 5556, and that's the year 1796. From the date of this endorsement, it took about 3 months till the book was published on Kislev, 1796. So that is, and he signs it Hakohen, Rabbi Meshulam Zusha Mianipeli, the small one, Rabbi Meshulam Zusha, or Zussel. Okay, and then you have the endorsement of Rabbi Yehuda Leib, and I think I mentioned it last time that he authored a book called Or Hagonos. He was a great scholar, and he was a student of the Vilna Gaon, who was the one opposing the Hasidic movement. And the reason why he opposed the Hasidic movement was mainly because his students told him negative things about the Hasidic movement. And the Vilna Gaon listened to them and didn't even want to meet with the leaders of the Hasidic movement or the scholars of the Hasidic movement. When they came to try to have a conversation and a dialogue with him, he refused. And but this Rabbi Yehuda Leib, he used to be a student of his, and then he became a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he authored the book called Or Hagonos, the Hidden Light. Probably a Kabbalistic book. I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds quite Kabbalistic. And so these were the two rabbis that Rabbi Shneur Zalman wanted to get an endorsement for his Tanya. Either because the Alter Rebbe had a relationship with them, they were around when the Maggid passed away, and the Alter Rebbe was there studying together maybe with them, But in any event, Ani Poili was close to Slavita Press. So because of that, it would make sense that, simply they were the closest great Hasidim that lived nearby. And since they wanted to bring it to print in Slavita, so they were the ones who he got the endorsement from. So here is the second endorsement, Haskama Sarava Chassid. This is the Haskama from the rabbi and Chassid, Meforsam, famous, Ish Aleki, Kadosh Yomalai, a holy, godly man called Holy. Yes.
What country is Anipoli in?
Anipoli, I believe Ukraine.
Okay.
Okay. And it says, Merein of Rabbeinu, Harav Rabbi Yehuda Leib Hakohen. This is our great teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Hakohen. Chochmas Adam Tar Pnei Haaretz. The man's wisdom lights up the face of the earth. Upon seeing the sacred work of this author's hands, Harav Hagoynish Alakim Kadesh V'Tahar Chassid V'Yanav, a great Goin, a genius, a man of God, holy, pure, pious, humble. Asher Mikvar Nigla Mistarov, whose hidden greatness has long been disclosed. Yoshev B'Sheves Techakmenu, who sat in the seat of wisdom. It's a verse in Shmuel, this statement. Yoshev B'Sheves Techakmenu. He sat in the seat of wisdom. Eitzel Adonina Marina Rabbeinu Goyin Olam, who sat with our master, our guide, our teacher, the genius of the world, who's referring to the Maggid of Mezrich as V'dola Mayim mi be'er Mayim Chayim. He was his student, and he drew water from the well of the living water. In other words, the author, the Alter Rebbe, was a student of the great Maggid of Mezrich, and he drew water from the Be'er Mayim Chayim, the well of living waters, which is also a verse, Be'er Mayim Chayim, in Genesis. Uke'es Yismach Yisrael be'igalois divrei kodshai, and now the Jewish people will be rejoicing with the release, with the revelation of his holy words. Hamachuber lahavi leves hadfus la'amilam darki Hashem, which is been compiled for publication to teach, to guide people a path of holiness. Kasher kol adam yachzeh b'pnimius devarav, as any person can see by looking at the inner content of his words. And when it says Israel will rejoice, it means the whole Jewish people. It also hints to the Baal Shem Tov, because the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement, and his name was Yisrael. So now Israel will rejoice doesn't just mean the Jewish people, but it also means the founder of the Hasidic movement will truly rejoice when his teachings become spread out to the world. Something that's a public knowledge doesn't need proof. Only out of concern that no one should have any loss or damage. The publishers, I am hereby reinforcing this legal warning that no one should raise his hand, viragli, or his foot, lidfais, to print this book for a period of 5 years. Whoever listens to this should be blessed with a blessing of goodness. These are the words of the one who states this for the Torah's honor. And today is Hayom Yom Gimel. This is Tuesday of Parshas Savai Tavkuf Nun Vav Leprat Koton. This is the year 556 of the 6th millennium, 1796, and then he signs it Yehuda Leib Hakohen. And that's the conclusion of the second endorsement. And there is a story that when they were both shown these papers, the initial papers, it was actually the same night. And when they saw the book that the Alter Rebbe wrote, they were so amazed and blown away, they had to go and show it to their friend. So Rabbi Yehuda Hakohen went, took the book and he said, I have to show it to someone. And he went that night and he was walking towards Reb Zusha Vanipoili's house. And the same thing happened. Reb Zusha Vanipoili said, I have to show this book to Reb Yehuda Leib Hakohen. And they both met in the street. They said the whole streets lit up with the rejoicing because of their because they were so excited about this book, the Tanya. So that concludes our class. If anyone wants to ask any questions, you may.